So we want to make this game that literally goes on forever. And if you really start to unroll what really lasts forever, then it's a pretty high bar. All sorts of things start to become issues in the forever vision that you don't really intuitively think of. And one of them is that anything that is a form of centralization becomes a weak point in a forever plan.
Break the cycle of exploitation, break down the barriers to truth, break into the next generation of privacy, break free. Free to scroll without being monetized, free from censorship, freedom without fear. We deserve more when it comes to privacy. Experience the next generation of blockchain that is private and inclusive by design. Break free with Midnight. Visit midnight.network/break-free. Built for speed, scale, and simplicity, Bridge helps businesses send, store, accept, and launch stablecoins instantly. Serve global customers without navigating the complexities of setting up crypto rails. It's how companies like X, Shopify, and AirTM unlock new markets, reduce FX costs, and move money at internet speed.
Okay, Sam Ewen here from CoinDesk. Very excited to be speaking with Hilmar, founder, CEO of CCP Games, and Sam Blackshear, co-founder, CTO of Mysten Labs. Here for kind of a great announcement and a discussion on the gaming industry. From what I'm gathering, and both of you jump in, but it sounds like for Eve Frontier, which is really a new version of Eve coming to Web3, you're working together with Sui on as a layer one blockchain. I'm sort of really interested on the whys of this, and I know we'll get into it with both of you. But I thought, Hilmar, maybe just starting with you, for those who for some reason may not have ever heard of EVE Online and what EVE Frontier is, perhaps you could just start with a very quick kind of primer on what those are.
EVE Online is a legendary MMO we built in our 20s back in Iceland some decades ago. That game has been prospering for 22 years now, and it's a bit of a marvel and has a bright future of decades to come. But over those years, we've definitely gathered up a list of things, or I have kind of in my brain and also written them down. If I had a time machine, what would I do different? Because I don't have a time machine, at some point, the list was long enough. Okay, let's go and do something about this. This is not something we can retrofit into EVE Online. I often look at it like if EVE Online is Rome, then we're about to build another city. I often think of it as New York. New York is kind of these are interesting kind of world capitals made of different material with kind of different contexts. So EVE Frontier is that. It's both 20 years of learning and a bit of hindsight. And also we wanted to explore more like a survival angle. So it is very much kind of born from the sort of survival genre. It is still kind of grows into an MMO, but in the beginning, you're very much in this kind of space survival with a bit of a horror to it. It's a bit of a scary game.
I love that. I know we'll dive in deeper in a minute. Sam, let's just do the same thing. Kind of give us a genesis of Sui and specifically, I think how you guys have designed Sui allows for blockchain gaming to sort of succeed really well on a chain like Sui.
Yeah, for sure. So there's so many parallels between CCP and Mysten Labs. And one is that we also built a system and then learned from it and then built a different one. So, we designed and built the Libra blockchain at Facebook and had 4 years of experience about what we did well on that and what we didn't. And so in 2022, when we started Mysten Labs and started working on Sui, we took all the lessons of, okay, what wasn't good about the programmability experience of this? What's wrong with the scaling? What's wrong with the speed and performance? And a lot of the motivating examples we had were in gaming, high performance gaming. And so, we thought for a long time about, okay, how can you make a blockchain so fast that you're not waiting on the chain to do actions? You can do real-time stuff like the epic space battles that happen in EVE. How can you scale to games that have hundreds of millions of players and have them playing at the same time and not have it affect what's going on elsewhere in the blockchain or have independent game actions affecting each other? Games aren't just, account balances. Games have data, there's ships, there's player statistics, there's inventory, there's the world map. There's images, all of this stuff. And so you can't just have a blockchain, you need storage like with Walrus. And so with Sui, we've been building with games as a motivation for a long, long time in terms of the performance, in terms of the programmability, in terms of having the full stack. And EVE Frontier, I think, is by far and away the most ambitious game that we've seen that's really taking advantage of all these characteristics. And there's so much vision alignment and sort of weird technical coincidences between the way we think about the world. And so we're super, super excited for this partnership.
I mean, I think there's something interesting, Sam, about, your team came from Facebook, and, I think about a lot of those early like games like Mob Wars and Farmville, like all these things that like required the idea of having hundreds of millions, if not billions of players in its sort of DNA and how it was designed. You see a game like EVE Online, 10 million players over time, and only opportunity for more as we go to EVE Frontier. How do you think about how you have to design a system that can handle every object, every transaction, every player being able to integrate it into the economy there?
So this is just good computer science, I think. So it starts with like, how do you have the lowest possible latency? And with SWE and with Mysten specifically, we've tried to make it so, okay, given that you're going to have a globally distributed network, how do you make it so the latency is just the time to send messages around the world with basically everything else in the noise? So that we built in from the very beginning. SWE is already the fastest chain, and we have this big upgrade coming to Mysten that's going to make it even faster. And then from the scalability standpoint, really the thing we were always anchoring on is we want to scale like the Web2 giants like Facebook do. We want to scale horizontally. It's not how many TPS can your blockchain do. It's if you give me a budget of cores and machines, how much throughput can you have? And then if you're going to give me more cores and more machines, I better be able to scale that out. And there shouldn't be a limit to it. So we've set that up with SWE with the object-centric data model from the beginning. And then the objects are just a nice representation where it works well for scaling, but it's also great for programmers because, objects in SWE, well, objects on a player's inventory. There's not this indirection of trying to represent these as accounts or having, special interfaces that you have to agree on. It just all fits together very, very naturally. So we basically thought about it this way from the beginning. And when we started talking to Hilmar and the team and, saying, oh, how does the EVE inventory work? Like, let's try to map it onto objects. So always be like, well, we made this decision. They'd be like, well, we made this decision. And it's like almost always the same thing. And so it's super, super cool. I think when you have teams that are strong technical teams and they're just trying to do the right thing for scaling something out and for building something that will last a long time, you end up in the same place. And so that's been really cool to see.
Hilmar, I want to get your take on this because I think a little bit about what EVE Online and EVE Frontier is. And I almost feel like, you have given people a blank sheet of paper and a crayon, and you're kind of saying, do what you want in this world and create the world that you want to exist in for good and evil and for, fun and horror now, it sounds like. So in some respects, whether it's sort of camaraderie and conflict or a player-driven economy, I feel like it mimics a lot of the desires of what crypto at its ethos and its core wants to be. I'm interested in sort of one, what drew you into wanting to create something that was on the blockchain? And two, what does it mean to give up control?
I think what drew us to a blockchain initially was it's very early on actually. It's about 2009, 8 or 9. We come up with this concept EVE Forever, which has been the vision for EVE since then. So we want to make this game that literally goes on forever. And if you really start to unroll what really lasts forever, then it's actually it's a pretty high bar. All sorts of things start to become issues in the forever vision that you don't really intuitively think of. And one of them is that anything that is a form of centralization becomes a weak point in a forever plan. I mean, if we look at the internet itself is very much designed to last forever. It's very decentralized. There's no single point of failure. It's literally made such that it cannot be taken down. So this idea of decentralizing things is something we actually tried it in the late 90s. We were building a VRML world using, like 386s as backend. And then we came with this distributed object system that's run on the client machines. But the cryptography just wasn't there, so you couldn't really do anything transactionally sound. Obviously, people could just hack the client and misrepresent the world state, so you could only do something that was kind of cooperative, of kind of sort of Minecraft creative mode like use cases, which are also pretty cool, but we're very much in the Minecraft survival mode end of the spectrum when we think of our games. So we actually did take a look at Bitcoin as a storage option. Back then, or as early as 2013, people were making games using kind of the output input in the protocol to persist something that was like a game state. So we have, ever since 2015, taken a look at the various iterations of what has been available and seen, okay, is this something that builds towards foreverness and immutability and these kind of things. And it's a little bit like, what is it called in the Groundhog Day? You kind of pick out the hole, and if you see your shadow, then it's time, and then it's not. And we've been in this kind of constant journey of like, we're kind of looking up and seeing, okay, what's available. When we take the most recent pass on kind of taking inventory of what's available, then Sui definitely became an extremely interesting option. Like Sam was saying, there's a lot of convergent evolution kind of elements in our architecture. In Sam's journey of starting at Facebook and having 4 years and then hindsight and then reiterating. And now when we look at like decisions we were making decades ago, they look oddly similar. Obviously, Sam and team have added a lot of fancy stuff on top, which we didn't have time to do because we're ultimately making a game, not scalable architecture as a service. But there was a lot of like minds think alike going on when we were comparing nodes, and also the clear focus that we have for games and understanding of scalability, understanding of like models that suit games, etc. And ultimately, I'm a believer in models that suit games are ultimately models that suit everything. Games are kind of the use case that usually tests the boundaries of use cases. I mean, we're now living this AI, moment mainly because of games, because NVIDIA had the time to build very fast matrix multiplications because of games. So there was definitely a meeting of the mind when it came to that. And there's a lot of cool things that Sam has done in the Move language. All this focus on static analysis and things like that really helps for sort of having an understanding of how you can parallelize things, which definitely is a big topic in performance overall. Kind of having some understanding of the topology of interactions and things like that, which we thought very deeply about in Eve to make Eve scale. So it was just a lot of coming together and looking at the world similarly.
If I can chime in on that one. Yeah, like when I was creating Move, like when you create a new programming language, like there better be a reason, right? There has to be something that it's doing that previous languages weren't trying to do or couldn't do. And with Move, what it was really is trying to facilitate interoperability across trust boundaries. In a conventional programming language, you're writing a program and it's sort of, you're walling it off in the outside world. You don't want foreign code to come in. You don't want foreign packets to come in. And that's how you do security. And in blockchain, it's not like this. You want to let someone establish their own trust domain with their own rules, with their own invariants. And then you want to allow them to take the objects from their place and flow into someone else's code and have their invariants still hold, but be able to build things on top of each other to compose. And that's a very, very hard computer science problem. And you really have to think about it from first principles to get that right. And so with Move, that's what we've been trying to do. And so with Move, like your Move package is the package author's trust boundary. They say, here's the objects I'm going to define. Here's the things that are always true about them. Here's some things that I have some flex on. And then other people can take those objects and build on top of them. And so that's a perfect fit for player-defined universes where you want to give players free reign to define anything, but you also can't tolerate letting player A step on player B's feet. It's been really, really awesome to be like, okay, this is finally the perfect fit. This is finally the thing that's really ambitious. And to me, this is what all blockchains are doing, this interoperability across trust boundaries, but I don't think others think of it that way or have designed it that way. It's more about, blockchains are about coins, or they're about blocks, or they're about NFTs or something like that. I think really like having the big picture philosophy on what this is for and why we're doing this has been a huge help to us.
I'm wondering, Sam, I think of, again, you come from the social world. I think of Friendster, I think of Musical.ly, two different applications that no longer really exist. And Hilmar talks about the idea of a game that lives on forever. How does one technically think through building a product that is going to outlive yourself? Is it about allowing others to make it what they need it to be and to jump onto the system? Is it about creating, at some point, AI that just brings it wherever it wants to go? How do you design out a product that can live forever, both gameplay-wise and blockchain-wise?
I mean, this is another case where there's an isomorphism between the teams because we are trying to build several products that last forever. There's Sui, there's Walrus, there's Steel. These things always they have a moment of creation, but after that, they run on their own. They are owned by the community. They only change in certain ways. And so that's something we have a lot of experience with and then have thought about a lot. And then from the game perspective, I think a lot of the same principles hold, which is, you need to get the initial conditions, the initial set of rules, right? That's the most important thing. There has to be a core of immutability that never changes, that then evolution, and then set the rules for what can change and what can't. And so with Eve, that's this digital physics. You take the physics of the real universe, and then you try to mirror it in blockchain form, in digital form, and then you see interesting behavior evolve around that. And then the evolution happens, and okay, could we make things more interesting without changing it? Can we add a new kind of feature? Can we do this other stuff? And then the question just becomes, how do those changes happen? Who gets to weigh in on them? And I think with these, like, you just have to see how the community evolves. You set up the sort of brick and mortar for governance, and then the right thing happens over time. And so I think that's how it's been with Sui. That's how it's happening with Walrus. I expect it's going to be very much the same for Eve. And for Eve too, like, a lot of people say, oh, you hear of blockchain games like in the, the early 2020s, like, oh yeah, we're going to create a game that lasts forever. We're going to create a game owned by players. None of those folks have any credibility. None of those games are still around today. Eve has been running for 22 years, 65 million total players. They have this epic, like 20 plus hour battles. Like, these are guys who are walking the walk. And when they say they want to do it, they are, and they're trying. And that's what's so inspiring about this to us.
This episode is sponsored by Bridge, a Stripe company. Just as the internet made information global, stablecoins are making money global, and Bridge is the infrastructure powering that shift. Built for speed, scale, and simplicity, Bridge helps businesses send, store, accept, and launch stablecoins instantly, serve global customers without navigating the complexities of setting up crypto rails. It's how companies like X, Shopify, and AirTM unlock new markets, reduce FX costs, and move money at internet speed. Explore the future of global financial infrastructure at bridge.xyz.
Hilmar, I want to dive into that a little bit from your perspective, which is, we have seen Decentraland, the sandbox, these worlds that were created that had a lot of hype, had a lot of financialization brought into them, and never really realized the gameplay. I would say that the promise was there. It sounds like, take a very different approach to that. When you think about a game that lives on forever, how do you look at what has not gone right and say we are going to create something that's different, that can be an ever evolving universe? Or is that something that is, do you not look at those examples and say, no, we have a very maintained vision that we want to bring to the world?
I mean, it's just hard to make games that people want to play, and certainly want to play forever. I mean, that's just hard. No technology really is going to help you to make an actually engaging game that is fun to play. All these forever plans are kind of a luxury problem. Like step one, you have to make a game that people want to play. Step two, okay, no, you have to run it for a bit. And step three, okay, maybe run it for decades, and then centuries and millennia and all that. So it's kind of a bit of a luxury problem for us to be thinking about, like, okay, can we outdo ourselves on that front? I mean, we aren't too preoccupied by really, ultimately, what kind of, for lack of a better word, data storage we are building the game on. It is important for the nitty-gritty implementation and making sure it scales and all that. And that's why it's very important to pick like good stuff that really is going to last and brings to the table something that helps us do it. But ultimately, the core of the exercise is to make a game that is fun to play. So, I mean, thus we have been taking a pretty hard look on, just like Sam was saying about Move, what justifies yet another programming language. And our high bar is what justifies making another space game for CCP. And that's a pretty high bar for us to even justify to ourselves why do this in the first place, versus just we already have our hands full in having EVE Online go on forever. And that is a lot about this kind of, okay, what did we really, really learn from the EVE journey, which is hard to really change. And I think that is definitely something about this ability for players to affect the world. We have had an extreme amount of inspiring examples from EVE, where the little API we opened up a few decades ago has spurred on like massive third-party kind of developed websites and experiences. We're having a bit of a moment now in EVE where we released something called freelance projects, which is kind of almost like a gig economy style approach to MMOs. And the third-party development system on EVE Online are doing amazing things. So again, it takes a high bar to, okay, what justifies making a new one? And this element of players literally being able to modify the server in real time alongside us. We can make the game together with tens of thousands of people in real time and millions of people playing it. That seems like something that justifies it. And then we have very much leaned into this kind of survival angle, which is kind of a very different take on the EVE universe, which is kind of EVE Online is this grand space opera, like a world with trillions of people. It's very cultured, it's very built out. It's also very shady and has all the spectrum of all the colors. But this is like a broken world. It's all ruined. It's on all of us to rebuild this again. You're starting in the dirt. You're like a cockroach that survived a nuclear blast, and you're supposed to kind of repopulate the world. It's a very different narrative and a gameplay kind of angle to the kind of take on a space game from CCP.
Hilmar, I want to ask a follow-up question on that, which is, you've discussed the idea that virtual worlds could be more meaningful than real life. I've been working on a thesis, or living within a thesis that says that we are in a network state over a nation state world, whether it's Taylor Swift or F1. There's hundreds of millions of people who are all passionate about a thing, and they want to collectively build, appreciate, communicate, and ideally transact within the world that is, which I think is either a perfect example of that microeconomy. I also think that the internet, being the sort of greatest game ever played, needed its own currency. It needed its own way of transacting. And so I think about this, like, was that the most important part of the crypto side for you, which was true decentralized ownership? And I say that because I think are those who probably are your own skeptics who say, oh, I love EVE Online, but maybe I don't like crypto, so why would I play this game? And I think is part of it, hey, this is just the way this is all evolving. Like, do you see digital economies in real life actually mirroring digital economies in game life?
I think this focus on the bill of ingredients of like, what is this game really built with, is kind of like has dominated the narrative a bit. There's also is a problem overall in games. Like CEOs like myself of gaming companies are talking a lot about their own sausage making of like what kind of technology, what kind of business model, like all these kind of things. Because I mean, that's kind of our job to figure out these things. But ultimately what people care about is the game fun to play? What is the game about? Is it an exciting proposition? Is it something to discover? Is it something to break? Is it something I can do something fun with? And I think it's more about focusing on that rather than, sure, I mean, we have our long stories about like how ownership of what you're maybe spending decades on building does matter to people. We're to the point where sometimes we get letters from estates of people which have passed away, and in their will it's stipulated, my daughter will get that spaceship, my son will get the other spaceship, and things like this. And we have a process in customer support, etc. This is all doable, but I mean, literally in our end user license agreement, we have to say, we own everything. You get to access it only if Hilmar is in a good mood. I mean, that is the hot take on the end user license agreement for all games. And I've never really felt that being like super fair, but these are more like esoteric luxury problems to have. Once you've made a game that people ultimately want to play for decades, then you worry about the foreverness. What about the inheritance concept of the items? Who really is the legal custodian of it? Can the world be self-sovereign, almost autonomous, like not even the company can stop it? These are kind of high-frequency concepts you start to think about once you get the base layer down. Even if we come a bit prepared, we made lots of games over the past 30 years. It's hard to make a game. It's just very hard. It's why I love it. It's one of the hardest things in the world to make a big game that people want to play for any serious amount of time.
So to me, the way I think about the problem to be solved is like so much of the richness of EVE Online comes from its players and just like how hardcore they are and how creative they are and sort of what they build on top of the world that's there. And as Hilmar said, like the only thing that they have is like there's a read API and there's playing the game. So one of my favorite anecdotes from a hardcore EVE player is there's somebody who's like, okay, I've infiltrated this other guild, and then we're going to be having a starship battle with my guild, and I'm going to have 2 headphones, one in each ear, to listen to the real-time chatter of my team and of their team at the same time, and I'm going to use that for the tactics. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm a busy guy. I've tried to do that before. I can't take 2 meetings at once, but this guy's learned how to do it and have a starship battle. How do we take that guy and let him do more? How do we let him mod the game? How do we let him program the game? Like, if you give him the ability to, change things, he's going to do really, really interesting stuff if he's already doing things this interesting with just the read API. And everything else to enable that is just technical details, as Hilmar is saying. Yes, it's a very hard technical problem. That's why we need Sweeve. That's why we need Wars. That's why we need Seal. That's why we need Move. But we're very product focused in terms of like that's what motivates me. I want to enable that. I want to get more developers on Sweep by virtue of enabling it. And then I'm genuinely curious to see what this person's going to do.
All right, Sam. So look in the future, 100 years, we think back on this moment where perhaps this is the biggest launch when it comes to the blockchain gaming space. And what do you sort of think that the folks playing 100 years from now are going to look backwards and say they got right, or maybe what they got wrong?
Yeah, well, 100 years, definitely, we've gotten a lot right. If anything's running for 100 years, any sort of creative endeavor, any game, any product, any company, like, hats off to that. So let me start off by saying, like, the majority of things will have been gotten right. I mean, I think it's hard to anticipate what people will get wrong because, we're trying to make all the right decisions at this point. But I think generally, like, from our experience with Libra, with Sweep, or other things, you introduce paper cuts. Like, you make a technical decision. You're like, this makes things slightly more annoying. I wish I could do it differently. And you usually just try to do those things to skew toward, it creates more annoyance for the maintainers of the system, the core developers, than it does for third-party developers or for applications building on top. And it's just a design taste and experience thing to try to get that right.
Hilmar, I'm going to tweak the question a little bit for you, and this will just be the last one we do. 100 years in the future, we look back. I think about how our own world has evolved over the last 100 years. And both the opportunity and chaos that's been created through it. When you think about those folks in 100 years looking backwards, is this the time of joy and abundance, or is the world they're living in the time of true kind of self-sovereignty? They're living a very different life in 100 years from now.
So I think there are maybe 2 answers to this. One is, like, to build a system that lasts for centuries. It's a great kind of computer science quote. It's a law by somebody, Conway, I think. But it's basically a good complicated system starts like a good simple system. Generally, the danger when you're doing something like we're doing with eFrontier is that we have like a curse of knowledge, because we know everything, like high level. We don't know the detail, but I can kind of feel the shape of what's to come. And there's a bit of an act in like deleting all that knowledge, because you will not get the details right. You will get the direction of travel kind of, and you will get the kind of the feeling of it, because I can kind of project back to do all that. But I really have to go back to when I was 27, laying down some of the original architecture for EVE Online and all the game design and all that, and get to the simple system that is good. So what we're doing now in the founder access, which you can join right now if you wanna see how it's going, is chiseling it all down so that just the bare bones of it, without all the moddability, without all the forever, is the game still fun to play just in its essence. And this is something we never really had time to do in EVE, because we were 30 people making EVE Online in 3 years, and we had like, I don't know, a couple of $1 million to make it. And also the hindsight of like, okay, what have we added to EVE? What should we have added? All these kind of things really allow it to get to the sort of kernel of like, what is really the strong system, simple system that really just works, and then have it grow on for that. But then the other part of the question is that EVE Online is a space game. It is about people living in space. So, right now, if you're interested in that, you can just like live and work in space right now. You can join EVE Online or Frontier. And a very much happen that will be in our future, that all of our little bickering on planet Earth right now might just seem a little bit sort of, I don't want to call them trivial, but maybe with the perspective of hindsight when we have colonized our solar system and something beyond, It's absolutely doable in 100 years. Just look at where we were 100 years ago. And I would very much hope to see some kind of echoes of that EVE Online, EVE Frontier, other space games maybe helped inspire that a bit by people just kind of being able to do it virtually before they could do it physically.
The best way to predict the future is invent it.
Yeah, where science fiction goes, as goes our path, right? So I appreciate both of you guys, Sam and Hilmar. Thank you so much for your time. Mysten Labs, CCP Games, EVE Online, EVE Frontier, check it all out, and we'll put all of the links in the show notes. So take a look, and thank you guys for your time.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Sam.